Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today we are doing another full fight review. If you don't know, that means I'm going to watch a full fight rather than just break down one simple part. And I'm going to be talking about what's going on as though I were both persons' coach, even if I'm not. And basically try to give mid-fight advice about what each person could be doing to adjust, better capitalize on their opponent's mistakes, what those mistakes are, and stuff like that. So let's go. So basic little middle howl coming up off of the middle bind. This person is standing in a low guard, essentially baiting in a high line strike. And as soon as that strike comes in, which in this case comes in a little low, maybe like a shield howl kind of thing, mostly just a probing strike it looked like. But after it is parried, this person throws that Zverkow low, keeps it nice and edge on, and looks like does make some pretty decent contact right there on the forearm. So, yeah, they call it. Try to cut out at least some of the walking around. So going into that last exchange, it's interesting that this person really focuses on what I guess you could call their low Zorn. That is exactly what I'm talking about. It's sort of their, it looks like it's their default defensive technique is to basically throw this out there and close off that line and present a point and then just figure out what's going on from there. The person on the left is doing a pretty good job of trying to probe around that and find different holes. That one-handed thrust, again, takes advantage of somebody who puts maybe a little bit too much emphasis on a initial cut, and then they just bind a couple times. But this last bit where they actually collide, we get the Zorn from the person on the right, and then both people basically pull off and decide to hit their opponents. And this definitely came in flat. And it was a very interesting decision to go in this particular direction because right from this bind, pulling off and coming all the way around, it wasn't really necessary to do that much rotation to get that kind of like force. So basically right now, they're both doing very solid fencing. They're trying to figure out what each person is good at and what they each like to do. But so far, since the other person comes back into frame, I would say this person is doing a very good job of varying up their technique to try to probe for weaknesses, while this person is doing a very good job of sticking to that basic formula and capitalizing on any probe that doesn't actually, make it. Yeah, it looked like that stab landed. So another successful method of getting around that Zorn. More cuts towards the hands, trying to get the opponent's blade up in the air and clipping the front of the hand. Yep, same basic idea. Rather than doing it in the way before, this clearing strike, again, just tricks your opponent into pulling up their hands, waiting for that follow-up high line strike, throwing the Unterhau, which came in a weirdish kind of direction. Because from here, it looks like they're throwing an Unterhau, so you'd expect the edge to keep coming forward. But then right about here, it flips back around, the thumb's on the bottom, so it might have been a little bit flat when it landed. But same basic principle. You trick your opponent into putting their hands up high by checking their sword, and then you throw something to a quadrant that they open up. Right, so you see a reversal here. This person's sitting in that bait guard, throwing one-handed probings. One-handed cut upwards is a questionable decision, and it doesn't look like it makes it, while this person sticks to the basics and just comes straight down on the top of the hand. I guess if you're looking for someone's reaction, throwing out strange one-handed attacks is a great way to figure out what their default de facto defense is. But in this case, it was that same Zorn. So in this particular case, a one-handed cut underneath exposed the hand to the one thing that the person over here was doing. Yep, another hand shot. Another weakness of having that Zorn being your initial action is that if people get used to the fact that you throw that over and over again, but it's not at anybody, your hands are vulnerable and they can just kind of weave around the area that your Zorn covers and just tap you in the hands. Good forward motion. Doesn't look like much happened, though I will check that Scheitelhound. Okay, it just was a little short. I think if he had waited maybe just a fraction of a second later, that certainly would have hit the top of the head. But a good Scheitelhound over the top. This pulling up of the guard eventually comes up here. The Sverk gets stuffed because it's right in the way of the hands, but maybe lands okay. I would say 90% of the time, though, this is exactly what you do when someone tries to throw those right Zverks. Because their right hand has to be very far forward, you can easily just push your weight and your momentum right into that right hand and stuff the Zverk easily. The follow-ups, they just kind of disconnect and don't hit each other. Back to the typical bait guard versus high guard. More Zorns. Another great method of getting through that. So that was the end of it. In review, I would say that this person has a very, very good tight Zorn, but the one thing they need to work on is maybe morphing that into a Scheitelhound or just adding more offensive options onto it. The great thing about a Zorn is that it's absolutely wonderful at countering whenever somebody throws an attack at you, but they're trying to hit you and not your sword. If you want the basic breakdown of a Zornhau, if I swing at you and at your head, my hands are extended and my point of percussion is, up a little bit higher than it would be normally. By throwing a Zornhau low, or at least along the center line and forward, what you're able to do is you're able to beat your opponent's blade out of the way as they're coming forward and then throw good follow-ups. The problem is that if somebody like this fencer figures out that you keep throwing that Zorn every time you enter range, what they're going to do instead is deny you that bind, and they're going to try to pick apart your hands or snipe their tip in to areas that you have uncovered. The advice for this person would be, besides do a few less one-handed cuts and certainly don't throw them from underneath, they did a very good job of adapting to their opponent's Zornhau. But one thing that they needed to make sure of is that when they're throwing those low cuts to the hands, that they make sure that they're not keeping their thumb on the flat of the blade. This is a very, very common thing that happens to a lot of people because they get so used to having this thumb on the shield position when they're in their regular stance, and they don't change out of it when they go to throw cuts from what would normally be a hammer grip. And suddenly that thumb position is rotating your blade, it's rotating your edge alignment, and it's getting you, it's taking what would normally be an absolutely perfectly well executed technique, and it's turning it flat. So that is all I have for this. If you would like to see your own fight reviewed on the channel, feel free to send me a link to HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com, and I hope to see you next time.